Well, it's awful. Business ethics is awful, and it is because there's so many business ethic courses being taught at university. I mean, I'm honest. It's true. I took a business ethics course. I got an MBA, right? And I took a business ethics course. So what did we learn? We learned law. Follow the law. Okay, pretty straightforward. Ethics, that's not ethics. That's just follow the law. What was the only, we got one ethical principle. The whole course, business ethics, one ethical principle. What was that? Don't do anything that you would be embarrassed if it appeared on the front page of the New York Times. That's it. It doesn't tell you anything about what you should and shouldn't do. Business ethics courses basically say, don't get caught. Do whatever you think makes sense. You want to be forced, and those are better business ethics. The really bad business ethics courses say, we know you need to make a profit, but you should make as little a profit as possible and really, really care about your stakeholders. What you really should do is worry about stakeholders. Shareholders, they're kind of stakeholders, but they're not that important. And they're kind of selfish bastards anyway, so you don't want to really take care of them. I mean, I'm caricaturing, but that's the reality. And I don't know what it's like at George Mason. I taught a class, I was at Santa Clara, which is a good Jesuit university, and when I first started in the finance department, we got this commandment from up above, from the Jesuits, that we want ethics. We want ethics in every field. So my chairman comes to us and says, we have to teach a class in finance and ethics. And I go, yes, I want to teach that class. I love finance and ethics. So I ended up teaching the finance and ethics class. The Jesuits hated it. They hated it. Because I taught that making money was a good thing. And maximizing shareholder wealth was the purpose of the corporation. And I taught objectivist ethics intermingled into a business ethics course. And they despised that because these students were coming from the regular business ethics class where they were being taught, no, it's all about stakeholders, it's all about others, don't. Profits are necessary, but unnecessary evil. We confuse people. We send them out into the world and say, without any ethical principles, without any ethical guidance, and say, go out there and make money somehow, not too much, don't appear in the New York Times. It's just a mishmash. So what we created were what Grant called, pragmatists, but pragmatists, philosophical pragmatists, which doesn't mean what most Americans mean when they mean Most Americans, when they say pragmatist, they mean practical. Pragmatism doesn't mean being practical. It means not thinking in principle, thinking about the short term and not the long term. In other words, getting away with it. And we've trained a whole generation of businessmen to be pragmatists, to do what they can do to get away with stuff. And notice that most frauds, put Bernie Madoff aside, Bernie Madoff was particularly awful. But you remember WorldCom? And Enron was pretty bad. But remember, WorldCom is typical of corporate fraud. What happened to WorldCom? WorldCom had this incredible trajectory of earnings, and they were doing phenomenally well. And their stock price was way up there. Every quarter they were reporting better and better earnings. And there came a quarter, somewhere around 1999, I think, where earnings were below projection, were below what analysts expected. So they got together and said, look, next quarter we're sure earnings are going to be better. So let's just fudge just a little bit. It's not a big fudge. A little fudge and make our earnings fit the projection. And we call that in accounting earnings smoothing, right? And, this is not a huge thing. People do it all the time. They do it all the time. And if you do it once, no big deal. The second quarter comes, and it's worse. Not only didn't they make up for the last quarter, they're now much worse. And now the question is, now it's the real moral. Do you man up and tell the world, or do you fudge? Again, but this time much bigger fudge. And the choice they made, which was a short-term, pragmatic, wasn't like they sat there and thought, we want to steal money from shareholders, because they were the shareholders. I mean, the people at WorldCom walked away with nothing. The managers who did this walked away with nothing. It wasn't them trying to make themselves rich. It was them trying to evade reality. It was them trying not to face the facts. This is exactly what Iron Man warns against. Exactly what the objectivist ethics would say. It's the biggest sin, right? In objectivist ethics, the sin is evasion. These guys evaded. They said, oh no, it'll get better next time. And at some point, and they did this quarter, if you remember the Leeson case, this is a guy who sat in Singapore and lost Barings Bank $2 billion and wiped out the oldest bank in Great Britain, right? He was thrown in bankruptcy. How did that happen? When he bought futures in Japanese stocks, they went down a little bit. So he could have let the front office know, but he didn't want to, so he doubled up, right? If you gamble, you've gambled, right? And you know you take a loss, the next time you double up because you want to make it back plus a gain. And of course this happens, it doesn't need to happen many times, and you're at $2 billion. And it's exactly, and it's not that Lisa sat down one day and said, I want to defraud the bank. Because he got nothing out of this. Nothing. He was flying high in reputation because he made him a lot of money. They basically left him alone in Singapore, so corporate governance broke down because they had no control over what he was doing. They didn't get proper reporting, and he blew it. That's how most corporate fraud happens, because of a violation of the principle of honesty and integrity and really rationality, being consistent with reality. Little fudges. And they don't teach you not to do that in business ethics. And the culture doesn't teach you not. The culture is basically a culture of getting away with it. And it's really, what is getting away with it? Let me put it another way, because I think this is kind of interesting. Our moral ideal is Mother Teresa. It really is, right? That's the saint. None of us are going to be Mother Teresa. None of us is therefore moral. Therefore, morality really doesn't have anything to say about what I do in business, so I just wouldn't. That's what really happens. Morality is excluded from business because it doesn't work. Sacrifice in business, that means I have to take a loss every year. I can't do that. So I'm not going to be moral anyway. So I might as well fudge it. In Iron Man's system, you're saying, I want to be happy, I want to be successful, I want to make money, not just today, but for the rest of my life. You don't fudge. You never conceive of fudging. So if that was being taught as business ethics, which we do with some businesses, you get a completely different result.